This is the sew along for Greenstyle's Kokomo swimsuit. In this tutorial, we will be sewing up the Tankini view and low-rise bottoms. Cut one set of B1 upper front main mirrored. Cut out the triangular dart along the solid line, select the modesty level desired, and mark your center notch at the overlapping point. Cut one set of L1 upper front lining mirrored. Cut out the center dart and select the coverage corresponding with B1. Cut one set of B2 upper back main mirrored and one set of L2 upper back mirrored. Cut 2 B5 front band and cut 2 B6 back band. We're recommending main fabric for all 4 pieces. Cut one set of B7 lower front tankini on the fold in both main and lining, and cut one set of B8 lower back tankini on the fold in main and lining. For the separate swim bottoms, cut one C1 front bottoms in main on the fold, cut one C2 back bottoms in main on the fold, cut one C3 front bottoms in lining on the fold, and one C4 back bottom lining. Additional supplies required include 3/8 inch swim elastic. Rubber elastic is highly recommended. For the tankini, 2-inch elastic for the underbust, and for the one piece, 1 or 1.5 inch elastic is suggested for your underbust. The first step in the pattern is to create the front bust dart. Both the standard view and full bust adjustment piece will have a dart. Fold the upper front main B1 in half along the sides of the triangle. Sew along the angle of the dart with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a narrow straight stitch. The shaded portion on the pattern piece denotes the 3/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat the dart process for the lining piece L1. Place B1 and B2 as well as L1 and L2 right sides together, aligning at the top of the shoulder. Sew with a 3/8 inch stretch stitch or serger across the shoulder line. Place the assembled upper bodice main right sides together with the assembled upper bodice lining. Line at the center. You'll notice that the lining is more narrow than the main. This is intentional to create a roll in the fabric to hide the lining. Three-eighths inch swim elastic will be sewn along the entire center line of the upper bodice. This can be done in one step or 2. Note that when installing the swim elastic, the elastic should not be stretched. Elastic will be installed at a taut 1-to-1 ratio. If the elastic is stretched during install, the bodice will be too short. Elastic will be sewn against the main fabric. If installing the elastic in 2 separate steps, first, sew your center seam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. It is recommended to nestle the seam allowances so that the shoulder seam will lay flat. Then in a second separate step, using a standard machine and a stretch stitch, pin and sew the elastic within the seam allowance. If constructing the garment and sewing on the elastic in one step, using again either a stretch stitch or serger, Take a 3/8 inch seam allowance and feed the elastic as you sew. The elastic should be offset from the raw edge by 1/8 inch to ensure that it is not cut in the serger blades. As a reminder, you are not pulling the elastic as you sew it on. It will simply lay taut with the fabric to reinforce the seam allowance and prevent the fabric from overstretching as it gets wet. As an additional optional step to prevent the lining from peeking out from the main, you can choose to understitch the elastic to the bodice lining. Be sure to sew on the far edge of the elastic. Repeat the process for installing elastic in the arm side using either the one-step or two-step method of your choosing. Align the lining to the arm side of the main fabric and sew. Elastic will be sewn against the main fabric. Pull the assembled upper main through the tube created so that the garment is right side out, and repeat with the other bodice. Fold the upper bodice in half, main sides together. Flip up the lateral edge of the main fabric to align the front and back at the top and the lining at the bottom. The underarm elastic should also align. Sew from the top of the main fabric down through the lining pieces using a 3/8 inch stretch stitch or serger. Sew from the top of the main fabric down through the lining pieces using a 3/8 inch stretch stitch or serger. Turn the two assembled bodice pieces right sides out as worn. You'll align the notches on both B1 front pieces, creating an overlap of approximately 3/4 inches for the standard view and an overlap of approximately 1.5 inches for the more modest view. Baste stitch along the bottom of the front overlap. If using the optional bra cups, slide them between the main and lining pieces of the upper front bodice. Temporarily pin them away from the seam allowance so they will not get caught when attaching the bra underbust. Place the front band B5 right sides together with the back band B6. One set will be designated as the main and one set will be designated as the lining. Sew along the short ends with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. Please note, for this sew along, B5 and B6 are angled. This is due to a smaller bust size relative to waist size. I have started the grade in the bra band. Slide the set of assembled bra band designated main around the outside of the assembled upper bodice. The fabrics will be right sides together. Start by aligning the side seam of the bra band with the side seam of the assembled upper bodice. The front bodice will be aligned at a 1-to-1 ratio with the front portion of the band. In the back, the lower portion of B2 will be aligned at a 1-to-1 ratio with the band as well. Do not stretch the upper back bodice when aligning it with the bra band. This will leave a gap between the left and right sides of the upper back. Repeat the process with the set designated as the lining bra band. The right side of the bra band will be aligned with the right side of the lining of the bra bodice. The assembled upper bodice will be sandwiched between the main and lining bra band. Starting somewhere in the back, sew around the bra band with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. Be sure to catch all 4 layers of the suit as sewing. It is highly recommended to nestle the seam allowances to reduce bulk. Place the lower front tankini B7 right sides together with the lower back tankini B8 aligning at the side seams. Repeat the process for B7 and B8 of the lining pieces. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger down the side seam. As was done with the bra band, place the assembled tankini main around the outside of the assembled bodice, aligning along the bra band bottom. Right sides together. Begin by aligning at the side seams and meet at a 1-to-1 ratio. Repeat the process for the tankini lower lining. Placing the right side of the lower tankini lining against the right side of the assembled bodice lining. The upper bodice will now be sandwiched between the main and lining of the lower tankini. Start sewing in the back of the tankini. Sew around with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger, catching all 4 layers of the tankini and bra band. Leave a 2-inch gap between the start and stop of your stitching to slide the elastic through. The pattern provides an elastic cut chart on page 11 for the 2-inch under bust elastic. However, it is always recommended to check the elastic length against your body to fit your personal preference. Using a safety pin or something similar, Flip up the tankini and slide the elastic into the gap left between the lower bodice and bra band. Secure the elastic at the desired length with a stretch stitch or X using a straight stitch and feed the elastic back through the band. Sew the remaining gap closed. Using a stretch stitch, sew between the gap in the back bodice pieces. Your stitch line will need to extend a 1/2 inch before and a 1/2 inch past the back upper bodice pieces. In this stitch, you will be catching and securing the elastic to the back bra band. This step will help maintain tension at the underbust and prevent the straps from falling off your shoulders. After trying on the tankini and deciding proper placement for the bra cups, pin them in place. Using a needle and thread, hand tack the bra cups to the lining, being sure not to catch the main fabric. For the final step, turn the tankini hem up 5/8 of an inch. Due to the multiple layers, it can be helpful to first serge the hem and or use a basting spray to hold the layers in place. Using a stretch stitch or cover stitch machine, top stitch the hem. Place the front main bottoms C1 right side together with the back main bottoms C2 aligning at the side seams. Repeat for the lining pieces C3 and C4. Sew down the edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. Turn the main assembled bottoms inside out. Slide the lining set right sides together into the main set. Align at the waist. As with the upper bodice, elastic can be installed in one step or two, using your preferred method. The elastic cut chart for the waistband and leg elastic can be found on page 11. Again, check against your body for personal preference. Sew the short ends of the elastic together using a zigzag stitch. Place the elastic around the wrong side of the main fabric. Pin or clip the elastic in multiple locations around the waist. Sew using a stretch stitch or serger with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, catching both the main and lining layers. If installing in one step, the elastic will be offset from the edge of the waistband by 1/8 of an inch. Optionally, understitch the elastic to the lining. Align C1 and C2 as well as C3 and C4 along the crotch curve. Fabric should be right side together. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. Turn the bottoms out, right side out as worn. Optionally, baste stitch around the leg opening. Turn the bottoms inside out for easier elastic install. The elastic will be placed against the lining of the bottoms. You will want the seam of the elastic to be in the back of the bottoms. However, starting in the front bottom of the crotch with minimal to no stretch, pin the elastic in multiple locations around the front leg curve. Starting at the top of the back leg curve, stretch the elastic so it lays flush with the back leg curve. Pin in multiple locations along the back curve. For this step, you can simply sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch or serger. Roll the leg elastic one additional time towards the lining side of the fabric, fully encapsulating the elastic in fabric. Top stitch with either a stretch stitch or cover stitch. Sew as far away from the folded edge as possible while still catching the elastic. This will help prevent the elastic from flipping during wear. Repeat on the other leg. And with that, your Kokomo swimsuit Tankini view is complete. Congratulations. We'd love to see your makes on social media. Tag us using the hashtag GSKokomo. Happy sewing, friends!